The sun hung low in the sky over Fort Sumner, New Mexico, casting long shadows through the narrow, muddy streets that wound their way past dusty buildings. It was 1874, and the small town buzzed with whispers. The air was thick with tension, and it felt as if a storm were brewing, both in the sky and among the townsfolk. Children played nearby, their laughter mingling with the unease that gripped the adults. It was a day that should have been filled with joy, but for Clara Renshaw, it was anything but. Clara stood at the center of the commotion, a young woman in a wedding dress that shone white against her dusty surroundings. The dress was beautiful and modestly adorned, but it had become a symbol of her isolation. Her fiancé had left her standing at the altar, choosing to run away rather than face what had turned into a scene of great mockery. He had abandoned her not just in body but in spirit, leaving Clara vulnerable to the judgmental gazes of those around her. The townspeople passed by, their eyes filled with scorn, and their whispers cut deeper than any blade. Cursed, they called her. That girl brings trouble. To them, Clara was a reminder of something they feared. Her disfigurement, an accident from childhood, only fueled their disdain. She represented difference in a community where conformity ruled. As she stood there, crumbs of her hopes scattered across the street, she felt both heartbroken and furious. Clara's fingers fidgeted with the lace of her gown as the clouds overhead began to darken. Thunder rumbled in the distance, matching her rising despair. She took a deep breath and attempted to hold back her tears, but as droplets began to fall from the sky, so did her courage. Then, like a figure emerging from the storm itself, Chaska stepped forward. A tall Navajo man with proud posture and gentle eyes, he was known in town as the son of a silversmith. Exiled for refusing to fight in a tribal dispute that did not align with his own beliefs, he had seen his own share of mockery from those who feared what they did not understand. In that moment when Chaska approached Clara, a hush fell over the crowd. The townsfolk gasped collectively as they witnessed this unexpected intersection of lives, a Native American man nearing a vulnerable white woman. In their world, lines were drawn very clearly. Absolutes dictated who should befriend whom based on unjust prejudices and born fears. "Would you like to come with me?" Chaska asked Clara softly, his voice like warm honey melting through ice. There was sincerity in his gaze that pulled Clara from her sorrow. It felt as if he offered more than mere shelter from rain. It was refuge from judgment. The townspeople reacted instantaneously, shock plastering their faces as though trying to quell an uprising before it could begin. Their harsh glances toward Chaska were layered with jeers meant to drive him away from Clara. With a slight tilt of his head, he dismissed their disdain and kept his eyes focused on her. Clara couldn't help but gaze into Chaska's eyes, deep pools of kindness untouched by bitterness or fear. In a single exchange, he shattered years of ridicule she had absorbed from neighbors meant to be friends. What would she say? How could she respond? Torn between fear of rejection and eagerness for connection, she took a step forward. "Can you really help me?" she asked hesitantly. "I will do my best," Chaska replied resolutely. It seemed he understood that love and empathy can forge connections far stronger than societal chains could sever. Still hesitating, uncertainty clouding her mind like the storm clouds above, Clara felt the weight of both their worlds upon her shoulders, the scornful looks from the townsfolk and Chaska's quiet defiance against discrimination. With resolve slowly blossoming within her heart, she nodded. As they walked together down those muddy streets, he in his worn clothing, and she in her wedding gown, it felt radical yet liberating. But even in that moment of freedom lay a warning. Their union would anger others who preferred things just as they were. The enemies they'd make were lurking just beneath the surface of acceptance. Yet as thunder rolled overhead and rain began to fall more heavily around them, Clara sensed perhaps this was not just an escape but the beginning of something new. A journey that would challenge everything they thought they knew about love and belonging in a world made for rules that neither of them wished to follow any longer. Clara Renshaw stood in the middle of Fort Sumner's muddy street, her wedding dress stark white against the dreary backdrop of scornful gazes and disapproving whispers. Each ruffle of lace delicately framed her figure, the fabric flowing around her like a ghost of the joy she should have felt. Yet, what once symbolized celebration now marked the beginning of her loneliness. Abandoned at the altar, Clara felt each moment stretch painfully as the townsfolk passed by, their laughter mingled with harsh jeers that pierced her heart like cruel arrows. The sun hung low, creating shadows that danced across the street, but it was not enchantment that surrounded Clara. It was a heavy weight of despair. She could feel their eyes upon her, eyes filled with judgment and disbelief. Cursed, they called her under hushed breaths, as if saying it aloud would somehow make it true. These words had followed her for years since an accident during childhood had left her face marred with scars. No one could see past those lines etched into her skin to the person she truly was inside, a girl yearning for acceptance and love. With every demeaning glance or taunting chuckle from passers-by, Clara felt herself shrinking further into that unforgiving dress. Her fingers trembled as they traced over the lace cuffs and delicate embroidery, seeking comfort in something tangible amidst the emotional tempest raging within her. How had this joyous day turned so bleak? The thought echoed through her mind relentlessly, each pulse of longing igniting fresh waves of sadness that swept over her. A sudden rumble of thunder rolled through the skies above, mirroring Clara's turmoil as dark clouds began to gather ominously overhead. Raindrops began to fall lightly at first, small splatters upon the dirt path, but soon transformed into a steady downpour that mirrored her tears. It felt as though nature itself conspired with her grief, echoing the sorrow she struggled to contain. Alone in this whirlwind of emotions, Clara fought to hold back more than just physical tears. She battled against hopelessness and shame that clung to her like a second skin. The townspeople's words replayed in an agonizing loop in her mind. "You are not worthy." With every breath she took, she felt more like a hollow shell than a bride, an empty promise of happiness washed away by rain and ridicule. Then came Chaska, a silhouette breaking through the chaos surrounding Clara as if he were parting storm clouds to reveal light beyond. His tall frame stood firm despite how different he looked, his noble posture and gentle expression contrasting sharply against those who surrounded them both. As he walked toward Clara, it seemed time itself slowed down. Each step he took echoed with compassion untainted by societal prejudice. "Would you like to come with me?" His voice was warm and inviting, cutting through the chill of both wind and fear swirling around them. In that moment, something deep inside Clara stirred, an ember fanned by his kindness illuminating shadows cast by despair. She raised her gaze from his worn shoes to meet his eyes. They were pools reflecting kindness rather than contempt. There was no judgment there, just understanding wrapped in sincerity. I don't know," she stammered softly, feeling both hopeful and terrified at once. Chaska's presence wrapped around Clara like shelter from the storm. It promised safety while also challenging everything she believed about herself and what others thought of her. She looked behind him at the astonished townsfolk who remained frozen in disbelief at this unexpected turn, the lines dividing their worlds blurring dangerously close. Torn between fear of rejection from others and an innate desire for connection sparked by Chaska's offer, Clara hesitated for just a moment longer until realization dawned. Perhaps life could hold something more than scorn for someone deemed cursed. Maybe it didn't have to be this way forever. With newfound courage blooming within her chest despite lingering apprehension swirling just beneath the surface, Clara took a step forward into uncharted territory where neither name nor past mistakes could define them anymore. As rain continued falling around them, the air growing thick with its scent, her heart began to beat louder against uncertainty's chains binding it tightly for too long. Together they moved away from that place where torment thrived. Perhaps together they might carve out a new narrative where love transcended boundaries meant to keep them apart. And as thunder rumbled above them more gently this time, as if acknowledging their brave first step, it seemed to whisper promises of hope anew waiting just beyond those muddy streets where possibilities awaited exploration outside rigid societal norms crafted by fear alone. The rain had begun to fall in earnest, mingling with Clara Renshaw's tears as she stood in the mud, her heart heavy with despair. Around her, the townsfolk of Fort Sumner gathered in a loose crowd, their faces contorted in expressions that ranged from curiosity to outright contempt. They pointed and whispered among themselves, casting glances that seemed sharper than daggers. In their eyes, Clara was an outcast, a girl marked by misfortune and misdeeds. "Look at her," one woman spat, her voice dripping with disdain as she clutched her child closer. "She's cursed. It's no wonder her fiancé ran away. Someone like her was never meant to marry," another man chimed in, folding his arms as if he were the judge of an unworthy case. "All that lace and no love behind it. She's just a fool playing dress-up." With every piercing word, Clara felt herself retreating further into herself. The laughter of some children nearby turned cruel as they echoed the adults' gossip, mimicking phrases like the cursed bride or the scarred girl. To them, Clara was a figure of pity or ridicule, a living lesson on how fate could be merciless to those who stood out too much or strayed from norms. "Why doesn't she just leave?" A voice rang out from the back, suggesting that perhaps her very existence was an inconvenience to their lives. The disdain dripped from each syllable like poison. This is no place for a girl like her. As the murmurs swirled around Clara like storm clouds closing in, she caught snippets of their conversations, words about being tainted and blackened by misfortune. Each phrase replayed cruelly in her mind, a reminder of how they saw only her scars and not the spirit beneath. She wished she could disappear into the ground beneath her feet, to be swallowed whole by the earth rather than face their judgment. Among this chorus of derision, Clara's heart ached with feelings of isolation. Even the ones who should have understood, her neighbors, those who lived alongside her, turned their backs when it mattered most. Their fear lay bare before her like a nearly empty canvas paint splattered with prejudice. They painted her as the embodiment of bad luck and tragedy, unable to grasp that she sought acceptance and love just as anyone else did. In the thickening atmosphere around her, Clara felt vulnerable not just because of what happened, but because she realized how fear shaped the hearts of those around her. They feared what they could not comprehend. They feared being associated with someone deemed unworthy by the unwritten rules of society. Just then, thunder rumbled again above them, a reminder that nature had its own storms brewing, and suddenly Clara found herself squinting against the downpour and the tears blurring her vision. Through that haze, she caught sight of Chaska stepping forward once more. The surprised murmurs began again among the crowd. What was he doing? Was he really going to embrace this cursed girl whose very presence offended their sensibilities? Look, now he's gone mad too, sneered a man near Clara. A silversmith's son offering shelter to a girl like that? What will he gain from it? Is he trying to provoke us? But Chaska remained undeterred. He looked past the jeering townsfolk and directly at Clara with eyes full of compassion that seemed to shield her from the onslaught of ridicule surrounding them. It was as if his very presence challenged every harsh word thrown at her, the weight of his kindness pushing back against their scorn. "Do you hear them?" he asked quietly, his voice soft yet firm amidst the storm. He stepped closer, blocking some of the townspeople's judgment with his own body. They only speak from their own fears. His words broke through Clara's feelings of despair like sunlight breaking through clouds after heavy rainfall. While she still heard their scorn echoing around them, Chaska represented something different, a glimpse into a world where opinions didn't define worth. With every second that passed, Clara realized something essential. Their fear could not hold power over who she was unless she allowed it to shape her reality. And standing there in that moment with Chaska next to her eased some of the weight bearing down on her heart. The townsfolk continued to mock and sneer. They could not dismantle what had stirred inside her, a desire for connection and understanding despite their animosity. And while she knew their prejudices would not vanish overnight, perhaps with Chaska beside her, she could begin to rewrite her own story, one where courage prevailed over condemnation. And so Clara took a breath deeper than any before, full of determination mixed with newfound resilience that pulsed within, and stepped forward beside Chaska into whatever awaited them beyond those muddy streets filled with fear and prejudice. As Clara stood there, trembling in the downpour and the bitter gaze of the townsfolk, Chaska stepped closer, his presence imbued with an air of calm that seemed to break the tension around them. The rain dripped from his dark hair, glistening against the backdrop of his rugged features. Chaska was a man shaped by hardship and resilience, a reflective silence wrapped in a solid frame. His past weighed heavily on him. He carried it like a quiet storm brewing within. Chaska's life had been one of constant grappling with expectations and choices set by others. Born the son of a silversmith, he'd watched his father create beauty from metal, crafting pieces that told stories of their people, graceful yet fierce. But unlike many who thrived in conflict, Chaska was different. He sought peace, believing that violence only bred more anguish. This conviction had exiled him from his own community when he refused to take up arms during a tribal conflict that pitted neighbor against neighbor. Their eyes often called him a coward for his choice to lay down arms and speak instead of fighting. Yet no amount of derision could shake his belief that true strength lay in compassion and understanding. As he traversed through life away from home, he learned to embrace this quiet courage, carrying it as a badge rather than a burden. Now standing before Clara, he felt something stirring within him, a strong desire to shield her from their scorn. In an instant, her sorrowful gaze met his firm yet gentle eyes, igniting an understanding between them that transcended words. He felt the weight of her sadness pressing down upon her just as he had experienced the chains of misunderstanding linked around his own heart for so long. "Why do they call you cursed?" he asked softly, breaking through the cacophony of mockery swirling around them like the rain falling from above. Clara hesitated at first, struggling with how easily she had been branded by the townsfolk's fear and ignorance. "Because I am different," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible above the patter of rain. His compassionate gaze seemed to invite her to share more, a kindred spirit who could understand what lay beneath the surface. Chaska nodded knowingly. "I once faced that label myself." He took a step closer to her, blocking some of the revulsion thrown by onlookers. "When I chose peace instead of war, I became an outcast. They thought I had forsaken my people." His face hardened slightly at the memory, but softened again almost immediately with warmth for Clara. "A warrior is not only defined by battle," Chaska continued. "True courage means standing up for what you believe in even when everyone else turns away." His words wrapped around her like an embrace against the cold winds and scornful stares. Clara blinked back tears as she processed his message. It struck deep within her heart, the notion that strength came not just from physical prowess but from being true to oneself amidst overwhelming opposition. Although she hadn't fought battles on any battlefield, her silent struggle with isolation and pain was hers alone to bear, and it took immense bravery to stand vulnerable before others. "Do you really think I can escape this curse?" she asked him earnestly, searching desperately for hope beyond their judgment. His face brightened with assurance and determination. "The curse is not yours, but their fear gives them power over you as long as you allow it." Chaska's gaze was steady and unwavering. "You can rise above their whispers simply by embracing who you are," he urged. In that moment, Clara's despair began to ebb slightly under the tide of their shared understanding. What if she could reclaim her narrative? What if their bond could birth new possibilities? It may have seemed unlikely, but with someone beside her willing to stand against society's scorn, perhaps she could discover strength anew. Thunder rolled again overhead as, however powerful storms might be outside, they echoed injustices within hearts too long subjugated by fear. But there was solace in knowing she was no longer facing it alone, with Chaska at her side offering warmth through companionship where once only ridicule resided. "I will join you," Clara declared softly yet resolutely, wiping away residual tears with newfound resolve shining through her once clouded eyes. The storm around them faded slightly as their connection grew stronger, kindred souls united against societal confines, determined to rewrite their stories together. And so they positioned themselves shoulder to shoulder, forging a path ahead away from bitter mockery toward an uncertain future filled with hope, where neither fear nor prejudice held sway over who they could become beyond those muddy streets stained by ugly beliefs once held firmly in place. The tension in the air was palpable as Chaska stood before Clara, his presence a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding her. The downpour intensified, sending torrents of rain cascading around them, yet it felt as if the world had fallen away, leaving only the two of them standing amid a tempest of emotions. As the townsfolk witnessed this unexpected moment, their collective gasp echoed through the muddy streets like the crack of thunder above them. "Is he out of his mind?" someone whispered from the edge of the crowd, incredulity laced in their tone. Confusion rippled through the gathered people as they turned to one another, eyes wide with disbelief. Chaska, the son of a respected silversmith, was indeed challenging everything they had come to see as normal. In their rigid world defined by boundaries and prejudice, he had just crossed an invisible line that should have kept him safe from scandal. Clara's heart raced as she absorbed the significance of Chaska's gesture. Offering her shelter in front of a crowd that labeled her cursed was not only a risk for him, it was an act of rebellion against societal norms that dictated who could associate with whom. This simple yet profound act created waves that threatened to ripple through both their communities. "Look at what he's doing," an elderly woman exclaimed, her voice trembling with outrage. "That girl is nothing but trouble. A mark against our town." Others followed suit, nodding and murmuring their agreement, their disdain palpable. But Chaska remained undeterred. He met their gazes with unwavering calmness, his eyes reflecting strength and conviction in stark contrast to the fear that gripped those around him. He was well aware of the potential for backlash. He had faced enough hostility since his exile for refusing to fight in conflicts during tribal disputes. Yet he understood that true courage lay not just in battles fought with weapons, but also in standing up for what was right, even if it meant standing alone against overwhelming odds. "Clara," he said softly, focusing solely on her despite the turmoil swirling around them. "You don't have to face this alone anymore." Those words wrapped around Clara like a warm cloak amidst the cold ridicule that surrounded her. For so long, she had felt isolated and detached from the world, the unwanted girl bearing a scarred identity shaped by others' judgments. But here stood Chaska, willing to share in her burden, daring to rewrite the rules meant to keep them apart. With every passing second, Clara sensed an undeniable shift within herself. The weight of the townspeople's judgments seemed lighter as she realized Chaska's act transcended mere kindness. It ignited something within her, a flicker of hope that perhaps acceptance was still possible. "I can't," she murmured hesitantly at first, glancing back toward the burgeoning crowd who continued to whisper maliciously among themselves, their disdain thickening the air around her. "What if they hurt you?" Chaska reached out and gently took hold of her hand, as warm and steady as a heartbeat amid stormy skies, and looked deeply into her eyes. "Let them try," he replied resolutely. "Together we can prove that love and compassion are stronger than fear." His words resonated within Clara like thunder rolling across a vast landscape, powerful and awakening, a call to embrace bravery amidst overwhelming feelings of vulnerability and isolation. She knew what she faced once she took his hand would not be easy. It would ignite animosities on both sides, unraveling years' worth of prejudices built upon ignorance. But for Clara, this moment offered a chance to reclaim agency over her life, to defy being mere fodder for gossip and scorn by stepping forward into something new alongside Chaska. Together they represented hope against despair. They dared to believe that unity could rise from division. As whispers among the townsfolk grew louder, some calling for sense while others urged extremes, a new resolve surged through Clara's heart. It wasn't just about accepting help. It was about forging paths anew where none existed before. In those precious moments shared beneath rain-soaked skies, Clara squeezed Chaska's hand tightly, a silent vow exchanged between kindred souls who had faced isolating storms in different ways but understood each other all too well now. "Let's go," she finally whispered with newfound strength coloring her tone, a decision solidified by courage rather than fear. As they prepared to step forward together into uncertainty, filled with possibilities beyond cruel judgment along muddy streets marred by prejudice meant to divide them both. And so they moved beyond the clutches of animosity aimed at keeping them apart into whatever awaited them outside societal confines, two individuals ready to carve out their place amid unknown challenges ahead, fueled by connection born from shared understanding and resilience against all odds. As Clara and Chaska stepped away from the taunts of the townsfolk, the rain began to lighten, creating a soothing rhythm that matched the newfound connection forming between them. With each step, they found themselves moving away from the chaos, finding solace in the safe space they were creating together. Chaska led Clara to a small grove a short distance from the crowded street, where towering cottonwood trees provided some shelter from the relentless drizzle. In this quiet haven, Clara felt her heart begin to ease, the echoes of mockery fading into the distance. She took a deep breath and turned to Chaska, his presence grounding her amidst the confusion swirling in her mind. The warmth emanating from him was a stark contrast to the cold rain still clinging to her damp dress. For a moment, they stood in silence, both absorbing the significance of what had just happened. "Thank you," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible above the gentle patter of raindrops landing on leaves. "I didn't think anyone would stand up for me." Chaska met her gaze with sincerity shining in his eyes. "You deserve kindness, Clara. No one should face judgment alone." His words flowed smoothly, like a calming stream easing over rugged stones. He understood intimately what it meant to feel alone. He had faced that despair himself after being cast out for choosing peace over violence. "I just don't understand why people can't see past my scars," Clara confessed, her voice shaky as memories of their cruel words flooded back. "They treat me like I'm some kind of monster." "They are afraid of what they don't understand," Chaska replied gently. "They cling to their fears because it gives them a sense of control, an illusion that keeps them feeling safe." He paused for a moment to gather his thoughts before adding, "But in truth, it is their fear that makes them weak. It's so much easier for them to judge than to get to know someone." Clara absorbed his words and began to feel an ember of understanding ignite within her. Chaska's compassion had reached beyond her immediate pain and touched on something deeper, her desire for acceptance and understanding in a world so quick to label and reject those who seemed different. She thought about how she had hidden herself away for so long, afraid that opening up would only expose her further to ridicule. "What about you?" Clara asked softly, curiosity tinting her voice. "How can you talk so freely about your own pain?" Chaska's expression shifted slightly as he took a moment to reflect. "Because I've learned that sharing my story eases its weight on my heart," he said thoughtfully. "I chose not to fight because I believed I could do more good through peace than through violence. But that choice came at a cost. I lost my home and my place among my people. The vulnerability in his admission resonated with Clara. She saw someone who had faced similar challenges and emerged with strength forged through adversity. Chaska's willingness to share his truth only deepened their bond as it inspired Clara to confront her own feelings without fear. Being different doesn't have to be a source of shame, he added, his voice firm yet gentle. It can be your strength if you allow it. Clara looked down at her wedding dress, now sopping wet against the backdrop of nature around them, a symbol once filled with joy now saturated with sorrow and judgment, and realized she had a choice. She could either let their disdain define her or reclaim her story woven with threads of resilience. With newfound determination bubbling inside her, Clara spoke again, this time with conviction coloring her tone. Maybe I can find strength in my differences too. Chaska smiled softly at her words as though he could see the walls she had built around herself begin to crack ever so slightly, allowing light in where darkness once thrived. Yes, he encouraged warmly. Together we can change how others see us by showing them the truth of who we are. As they continued talking, sharing stories of their lives filled with ups and downs, their laughter mingling with droplets falling from leaves, they solidified an understanding that transcended mere companionship. It blossomed into something beautiful and profound. In that sheltered grove surrounded by whispers of nature and distant echoes of discontent from the town behind them, Clara felt lighter than she had in ages. A spark igniting hope within both their hearts that perhaps together they could not only rewrite their paths but also inspire change around them. With each shared experience and heartfelt exchange, their bond deepened, two souls navigating through chaos hand in hand, ready to embrace whatever challenges awaited them beyond those muddy streets marred with fear and prejudice. Together they would forge ahead on this journey towards self-acceptance and collective strength fueled by connection born from understanding and unwavering support. The days after Clara and Chaska forged their bond felt charged with a new energy, yet the world around them remained unchanged. As they navigated their friendship in the shadows of judgment, both faced mounting challenges from the very communities they had once called home. The townsfolk of Fort Sumner, ever vigilant, watched with narrowed eyes as Clara began to emerge from her shell, emboldened by Chaska's unwavering support. Whispers arose like a low tide, persistent and invasive. Children were often warned not to play near the grove where Clara and Chaska met. Parents passed down tales that painted Clara as a witch who would bring bad luck to anyone who dared approach her. "Stay away from that girl," one mother would hiss, gripping her child's hand tightly. "She's cursed. She'll ruin you." Even more troubling were the murmurs from Chaska's own people. Though he had chosen peace over conflict, there were those among the Navajo who viewed his decision to ally with Clara as a betrayal of their shared struggles. "You choose a white girl over your people," an elder questioned him harshly one day when he returned to visit his family. "What will they think of us? You are tainting your bloodline." Chaska felt the weight of these words like stones in his heart. He had always believed in bridging divides through understanding and compassion, yet now his choices were scrutinized through a lens of anger and resentment. It seemed that wherever he turned, he was met with judgment for standing beside Clara, a symbol of everything that many considered taboo. Despite these pressures, Clara found comfort in their growing friendship. Their conversation shifted from fear to plans for the future, dreams that included defying expectations together rather than succumbing to them. They explored each other's cultures, sharing stories that made them laugh and cry with equal measure. One crisp afternoon in early fall, as leaves began to turn golden and fall around them like confetti from a celebration, Clara shared tales of her childhood. The laughter echoing through her old home before tragedy struck and left scars on her heart and skin alike. "I used to love playing dress-up in my mother's gowns," she recalled wistfully, fiddling with the hem of her wedding dress which now felt like a burden rather than a symbol of joy. "We would have tea parties in our backyard while pretending we were princesses waiting for our knights." Chaska listened intently as she spoke about the innocence lost and dreams deferred. In turn, he revealed snippets from his own life, stories rich with tradition but also marked by the pain of exile. "When I chose not to fight," he said quietly, staring into the distance where mountains met sky, "I thought I was standing for something greater than myself, a belief in peace over warfare, and it cost me my place among my people." His voice trembled slightly as he added, "But maybe by choosing friendship with you instead of remaining isolated in fear, I can find a new purpose." As they leaned into each other's stories surrounded by nature's embrace, laughter filled their small sanctuary even amid adversity. It became their steadfast refuge against external storms brewing just beyond the grove. But even as hope blossomed within them both, pushing back against societal expectations, the tension continued building outside their haven. An unavoidable clash was on the horizon. One evening as twilight descended upon Fort Sumner like a shroud ready for battle, Clara overheard two men arguing heatedly about Chaska's presence near her home. "That boy is beneath her. Just wait until folks see what happens when they let such things go unchecked," one man shouted angrily. Fear gripped Clara's heart at realizing how deeply ingrained prejudice ran within their community, how quickly it could escalate into violence if left unchecked. "I won't let them hurt you," she told Chaska firmly after recounting what she'd heard later that night as they hid beneath trees while rain fell gently above them yet again. His expression shifted slightly at her words, surprise mixed with affection, but also concern too heavy for either to carry alone any longer. "We must be careful," he responded softly but resolutely, squaring his shoulders against an unseen adversary looming on both sides, the town unwillingly caught between old grudges and new beginnings. "Together we can find strength against this," Clara replied fiercely. Determination radiated from her like firelight flickering against darkness closing in around them. They sat silently for a moment longer before clasping hands tightly, a vow exchanged silently between them both, no matter what challenges lay ahead, whether faced from townsfolk or tribesmen alike. They would weather this storm together, united by understanding forged through kindness despite all obstacles placed before them. In that moment beneath falling leaves, amidst scattered raindrops weaving tales whispered long before either arrived, they became more than just friends navigating chaos. They became allies ready to rewrite not only their own destinies but possibly challenge every norm meant to keep them apart along life's winding path ahead. The atmosphere in Fort Sumner grew tenser with each passing day as Clara and Chaska continued to stand together against the tide of prejudice. Whispers turned into shouts, and the close-knit community that had once been their home became a pressure cooker of anger and resentment. The townsfolk, emboldened by their fear of change, began to form factions, those who supported Clara and Chaska and those who vehemently opposed their bond. One chilly evening, a group of men gathered at the local tavern, fueled by spirits and indignation. "It's an abomination," one man exclaimed, slamming his fist on the table, causing nearby patrons to jump. "Allowing him to associate with her puts us all at risk. Soon, our children will think it's acceptable to befriend cursed girls." Another voice chimed in, "You think she brings bad luck? What about him? A Navajo man casting a shadow over our town? We need to take action before it's too late." As the discussions intensified, Chaska caught wind of the brewing storm. The growing animosity from the townspeople weighed heavily on his heart. He had hoped for understanding and compassion but found only backlash and hostility. Despite his resolve to stick by Clara's side, he knew they were both walking a precarious line that could easily snap. Meanwhile, Clara faced her own challenges. She had returned to her home after days spent with Chaska, only to find her family torn between anger and fear. Her mother wept at the thought of her daughter mingling with someone considered an outsider. "What are you doing, Clara? You're inviting trouble into our lives," she pleaded. Clara felt trapped. She wanted to defend her friendship with Chaska but feared the wrath of her own family more than anything else. "He is not trouble," she insisted fiercely. "He sees me for who I am inside." But her words fell on deaf ears as her mother continued to fret over the potential consequences of such a union. As time passed, tensions escalated further when Clara and Chaska decided to attend a local event, a harvest festival meant to unite the community in celebration despite its rifts. They arrived together, hand in hand, both determined to show that their bond could withstand scrutiny. However, as soon as they stepped into the bustling square filled with laughter and music, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Gasps echoed through the crowd as people turned their heads in disbelief at what they saw. Clara felt a mix of apprehension and defiance swell within her. She was determined not to let fear control her anymore. But before long, a group of men approached them with hostile glares etched upon their faces. "What do you think you're doing here?" one man shouted, stepping forward menacingly. "This isn't a place for you, especially not with her. You need to leave." Chaska's grip on Clara's hand tightened as he stepped protectively in front of her. "We have as much right to be here as anyone else," he replied calmly but firmly, his heart racing. He felt the eyes of both supporters and detractors upon them. It was a moment fraught with danger that could escalate quickly. "Is that so?" another man sneered, crossing his arms defiantly. "You stand beside that cursed girl? You'll bring ruin upon us all." We won't let this blasphemy continue. At that moment, Clara found her voice rising above the chaos. You don't know me, she declared fiercely, stepping forward despite Chaska's protective stance. You don't know what it's like to feel alone in a crowd or judged for being different. I am not cursed. I am simply trying to live my life. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife as stunned silence enveloped the space around them. Clara's heart pounded in her chest while she stood defiantly before those who sought to belittle her existence. Chaska looked at her with admiration. He had never seen such fire within her before. It was awe-inspiring yet terrifying all at once. Before the confrontation could escalate further, voices of support began rising among those witnessing the scene unfold. A few brave souls from the fringes stepped forward, friends who had known Clara since childhood or had respected Chaska's choice for peace over violence. Leave them be, one woman shouted boldly. Clara deserves happiness just like anyone else. His strength is not defined by his skin color nor hers by her scars, another voice chimed in, unwavering and resolute against ignorance. The balance began tipping as supporters rallied behind Clara and Chaska while dissenters hesitated. They realized that perhaps unity could emerge from unexpected places even amidst prejudice. But still, Clara felt the threat looming just beneath this brief glimmer of hope. The risks they faced were real and substantial as emotions boiled over along painful lines drawn deeply within society. Together they held their ground, a symbol against adversity ready not only to confront what lay ahead but also determined enough to challenge every norm meant to keep them apart as allies willing to navigate dangerous waters unafraid of what came next. In the days following the heated confrontation at the Harvest Festival, Clara and Chaska found themselves navigating a world filled with both supporters and detractors. The whispers of discontent still echoed in Fort Sumner, but within the safety of their bond, a new resilience began to bloom. Clara was determined to embrace her uniqueness, inspired by Chaska's unwavering encouragement. One crisp morning, as sunlight filtered through the trees in their grove, Clara sat cross-legged on the grass, fiddling with a piece of worn fabric she had found in her mother's things. It was a remnant of her childhood dress-up clothes, a faded fabric adorned with flowers that reminded her of more innocent times. Memories flooded back of days spent pretending to be someone else, hiding behind costumes instead of embracing who she truly was beneath her scars. Why do you keep looking down? Chaska asked gently, drawn by the shift in her demeanor. He had settled on the grass beside her, his presence steady and comforting. I feel like I've been hiding for so long, Clara confessed, lifting her gaze to meet his. When I wear this dress, she gestured to her wedding gown. It feels heavy with expectations and memories I can't escape. Chaska considered her words carefully. You don't need to hide from who you are, he replied. Your scars may tell a story, but they do not define you. Clara felt tears prick at her eyes as his words sank deep into her heart. For too long, she had let fear dictate how she viewed herself and how she allowed others to treat her. But what if they never see me? She whispered, vulnerability spilling from her lips like raindrops on thirsty soil. They will see you if you show them your strength, Chaska encouraged firmly. Let your light shine through your scars, show them that there is beauty in resilience. His eyes sparkled with determination as he spoke. It was infectious. A newfound resolve surged within Clara as she thought about his words. Perhaps it was time for change, not just for herself, but for those around her too. She stood up slowly, brushing off the dirt from her gown as if shedding layers of doubt along with its weight. What can I do? She asked eagerly. Start by being proud of who you are, Chaska replied, rising to stand beside her. Let's create something beautiful together. He shared an idea he had been mulling over, a way for them to showcase their connection while also celebrating their differences amidst an environment filled with prejudice and fear. They would organize an event that brought together individuals from both communities, an evening of storytelling and art where everyone could share their unique experiences without judgment. Clara's heart raced at the thought. This could be their chance to bridge divides and demonstrate that acceptance could rise above bias. With Chaska's help, they would gather allies willing to share their own tales, stories that echoed themes of resilience, love, and understanding. The next few weeks were filled with planning and preparation as Clara poured herself into the event while embracing every aspect of herself, the good and the bad alike. With each passing day, she felt braver than ever before, as if layers of doubt were stripped away by sheer determination. The night of the event arrived under a blanket of stars twinkling brightly against a velvet sky, a symbol of hope illuminating darkness all around them. Lanterns flickered gently among trees surrounding their gathering space, a blend of laughter and music creating an inviting ambience that beckoned people closer. As townsfolk arrived alongside members from Chaska's community, Clara felt both excitement and nervousness swirl within her, yet standing beside Chaska quelled some fears with strength drawn from shared purpose. Together they welcomed everyone warmly, each interaction layered with kindness fostering unity amidst differences. When it was time for stories to be shared under those shimmering stars, Clara took a deep breath before stepping forward into the light cast by lanterns surrounding them all, her heart pounding in rhythm with newfound courage pulsing through every vein. "I'm Clara Renshaw," she began nervously but steadied herself as voices faded into silence eager to listen. "I stand here tonight not just as someone marked by scars, but also as someone who has learned that beauty lies in differences, and we all have our own stories worth telling." As she shared pieces from her life, the pain of abandonment mixed beautifully with moments laced heavily in hope. She could see heads nodding along and understanding as more voices joined her, sharing tales rich with experience illustrating strength found against adversity. The atmosphere shifted palpably among them. Laughter mingled seamlessly alongside tears shed over heartfelt stories exchanged. A tapestry woven together highlighting resilience that connected each individual present regardless of background or fears once held tightly at bay. In those moments under starlit skies surrounded by allies ready to embrace change alongside them, Clara realized true acceptance first began within oneself. It flourished through bravery shown in sharing raw truths while dismantling barriers forged through ignorance one story at a time. And thus together they embarked upon this journey towards self-acceptance fueled by understanding born out of courage, all representing glimmers lit along paths winding ahead unafraid amidst shadows left behind. The evening of the storytelling event glimmered with promise, but the tension that had been brewing in Fort Sumner soon took on an ominous tone. Clara could feel the weight of impending storm clouds mirroring her own internal struggles. This was a pivotal moment that could alter everything they had fought for. The laughter and music that once filled the air were now drowned out by the thrill of anxious anticipation. As Clara and Chaska prepared to address the crowd, a palpable shift gripped the atmosphere. Townsfolk gathered, some radiating excitement while others wore frowns etched with disapproval. Clara caught sight of familiar faces, those who had once been her friends, now standing with crossed arms and hardened gazes. They were a reminder of everything she stood against and everything she desperately wanted to prove. "Are you ready?" Chaska asked softly, glancing at her with a mixture of concern and encouragement. His eyes reflected the shared commitment to face whatever lay ahead together. Against the backdrop of encouraging supporters and harsh critics alike, Clara could feel both dread and exhilaration stirring within her. "What if they don't accept us?" she murmured, doubt creeping into her voice as she shared a fleeting moment of vulnerability. "What if this is where it all falls apart?" Chaska stepped closer, the warmth emanating from him providing a momentary shield against her fears. "We can't control how others feel about us," he said firmly. "But we can choose how we stand up for ourselves." He extended his hand toward Clara. "Let's show them who we are." With a deep breath, Clara took his hand, strength surging through their connection as they stepped forward together into the clearing where lanterns flickered like stars dotting the night sky. The crowd fell silent as Clara raised her chin defiantly and met gazes filled with apprehension and judgment head-on. "Tonight we gather not just to tell stories," Clara began, her voice stronger than she anticipated, "but to embrace what makes us unique rather than hide behind it. We are not defined by our pasts or others' perceptions. We are defined by our courage to be ourselves." A ripple flowed through the crowd. Whispers began to rise again among those who remained skeptical and those who felt inspired in response to her words. Before long, she noticed one particularly vocal opponent moving forward, a man known for his harsh opinions on their bond. "This is an insult to our community," he shouted abruptly, stepping closer with anger radiating from him like a force to be reckoned with. "You think sharing your tales will change our minds? You're only inviting trouble by embracing an outsider." Purely instinctive anger welled in Clara's chest, as though every scar she'd ever borne flared to life demanding recognition, not just for herself but for Chaska too, for everything they had faced together. With newfound determination swelling inside her, she stepped forward defiantly despite Chaska's protective stance beside her. "Our community should be built on acceptance, not fear. Hiding from those different from us only serves to isolate us further." Her heart raced as clarity flooded her mind. There was no going back now. Chaska gave her strength as he continued to stand resolute at her side. offering silent support amid dissenting shouts aimed at diminishing them both. "Your hatred blinds you," he said, addressing the man who had spoken out against them. "We're here because we believe love and understanding can challenge ignorance." In that charged moment before them, between fear and harmony, Clara felt waves of something radiant rising beyond mere words shared amidst opposing forces. She sensed solidarity forming among those who dared to see beyond skin colors and scars. Their supporters rallied into view, familiar faces emerging, not only defending them but eager to amplify their message of hope alongside them. One by one, voices rose above chaotic exchanges, neighbors sharing their own stories of acceptance drawn from personal challenges. They intertwined threads of resilience together against opposition. "I'm proud to be different," one young woman remarked fiercely, stepping forward unyielding against whispered judgments just as Clara had done moments before her own transformation into empowerment revealed itself. "I choose kindness over fear," a man echoed with determination carved onto his face as he joined the chorus validating lives lived boldly rather than nestled within barriers constructed by ignorance alone. Together, Clara and Chaska stood surrounded by those willing to embrace change. Each testimony forming an avalanche capable of dissolving age-old prejudices entrenched deeply in Fort Sumner's soil like stubborn roots grasping tightly without hope of unearthing joy fully realized otherwise. Determination laced through Clara's veins. Perhaps it didn't matter if adversaries lurked among them still, that it was in standing firm against adversity state of mind threading their destinies anew. The true challenge lay instead within the courage needed when faced with choices standing boldly to rewrite history forever shaped around lines meant solely for division. At that climaxing nexus where fear encroached clawing for dominance against bravery revitalizing dreams mapped into existence, it struck Clara profoundly. Resistance blossomed amidst chaos echoed beautifully across lives lived unseen until now drawn into view laser-focused through lenses no longer clouded due simple ideas born again lighting pathways forward possibility promising brighter tomorrows waiting just beyond those shadows holding tight from behind every curve winding ahead unbroken yet. Still traversable upon this journey, they dared embrace heart-led hand-in-hand determined conquerors paving way. Together, whatever awaited, unflinchingly embracing all that made up their individual stories, merging together, eager set forth their course onto brighter futures. As the night of the storytelling event began to wind down, Clara stood amid flickering lanterns and soft laughter, feeling a profound shift within herself and the community. The responses to their stories had formed ripples of connection that flowed through the crowd, some faces lighting up with understanding, while others remained drawn tight with unease. Clara could feel the tension still simmering beneath the surface, a reminder that not everyone was ready to embrace change. Chaska moved beside her, taking in the vibrant scene. "You did it," he said, pride shining in his eyes. "Tonight was beautiful." Clara smiled, but felt a weight settle upon her heart. "It was," she agreed, but her mind turned back to the scornful reactions they had faced. "But what happens now? There's still so much anger out there." Chaska nodded thoughtfully, sensing her underlying worry. "Change doesn't happen overnight," he said softly. "We've planted seeds tonight, and with time, they may grow into something more positive." As if on cue, a raspy voice shattered their moment. A man who had been vocal against them stood at the edge of the gathering, his expression hardened and resentful. "This isn't over," he shouted to Clara and Chaska. "You think sharing your stories will change our minds? We won't stand by idly while you tarnish our town's name." Clara's heart raced. Her earlier confidence suddenly wavered as she realized their struggles were far from finished. Chaska placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, grounding her in that moment of chaos. "You don't speak for us all," an ally called out bravely from among the group. A ripple of support surged as more voices rose together against the discontent spiraling into potential conflict. "We choose acceptance over fear," another proclaimed defiantly. The crowd began to divide between supporters and detractors, creating an electric tension that buzzed across the grove like an impending storm ready to break. Clara felt herself wobble on the precipice between fear and resolve. Did she retreat back into anonymity or boldly fight for what she believed in alongside Chaska? "Clara," Chaska whispered urgently beside her, seeing the tumultuous thoughts wrestling within her mind. "What do you want?" "I want people to see me. I want them to accept us." Her voice trembled but gained strength as she spoke. Every ounce of suppressed emotion demanded recognition, insisting on being heard. "Then let's show them how we stand together," he urged gently. Without thinking twice about it, Clara took a step forward into the limelight cast by lanterns shimmering around them, a firm resolve coursing through her veins. She wouldn't let this moment slip away without amplifying its impact. This could be the tipping point for both of their lives and perhaps even for their community. If you believe in standing against prejudice, Clara began again with newfound steady confidence filling her words, then you must also believe in embracing differences among us. You can choose when faced with fear to fight it with kindness instead of resentment. Pushing through barriers built by years of divided beliefs surrounding race and acceptance didn't come easily. Doubt still lingered thick in this pivotal hour. None of us should have to hide, she continued passionately. When we share our struggles, our hopes, we transform not only how others view us, but also how we see ourselves. What good is our togetherness if we allow fear to keep driving us apart? As Clara shared heartfelt truths forged from unabashed vulnerability into resilience formed through shared trials alongside Chaska, an unwavering flame for change ignited amongst supporters visibly stirred from their seats. Their voices grew bolder, inspired by courage heard throughout Fort Sumner, gathered under night skies full of stars reflecting hope anew. In that electrifying moment, amid encouragement laced between chants rebuking hatred, something remarkable happened. Those who once shunned Clara began unearthing deeper reflections within themselves that mirrored progress born through solidarity against historical injustices ever tearing lives left untouched too long ago scattered throughout dust-slathered quaint streets they've all walked. Before different paths taken line forever etched away, now toward convivial heartbeats slowly striving. Toward relationships built above prejudice held firm no longer wavering through shared humanity above all folds. Yet still lingered shadows wanting retaliation threatening unity almost tangling tighter seeking favoritism tempting division attempting knockdown bicker amidst rich stories exchanged freely facing betrayal rising constantly needing vigilance safeguarding each precious bond rekindled igniting warmth between worlds once fragile entwined reigniting purpose and fusion across those willing embrace responsibility fostering togetherness shining brightly upon brighter tomorrows. Despite lingering doubt, as darkness loomed scattered overhead wrapped shadow-filled lives shifting ahead, Clara knew one thing. Every single choice made uphill mattered. Every moment ignited held conceptions transforming fears once harbored embedded deeply concerned along life's lesson learned Dutch understanding blossomed led forward unfurling wondrous connection brave enough propelling beyond presenting arcs poised at bifurcation building arcs bearing forth bright possibilities awaiting beyond. Midnight's monochrome spin yet threaded perpetually towards light shimmering atop hopeful trails when shimmering bonds surfaced anew amidst future woven tirelessly ahead promising renewal stood firm untouched owning their collective existence replaced foundational narratives shaped around understand. Ding set courageously ahead with unswerving love guiding way down trails worth journeying. Despite lingering doubt, as darkness loomed scattered overhead wrapped shadow-filled lives shifting ahead, Clara knew one thing. Every single choice made uphill mattered. Every moment ignited held conceptions transforming fears once harbored embedded deeply concerned along life's lesson learned Dutch understanding blossomed led forward unfurling wondrous connection brave enough propelling beyond presenting arcs poised at bifurcation building arcs bearing forth bright possibilities awaiting beyond. Midnight's monochrome spin yet threaded perpetually towards light shimmering atop hopeful trails when shimmering bonds surfaced anew amidst future woven tirelessly ahead promising renewal stood firm untouched owning their collective existence replaced foundational narratives shaped around understand. Ding set courageously ahead with unswerving love guiding way down trails worth journeying. As the dust settled from the storytelling event, Clara and Chaska stood together, feeling the aftermath of their brave stand against prejudice swirl around them. The vibrant community gathering had sparked a conversation, igniting flames of hope amidst the shadows of division. While they had faced hostility from some, many had also embraced their message of acceptance, letting it seep into the very fabric of Fort Sumner. Days turned into weeks, and a palpable change began to ripple through the town. Clara noticed more people engaging with her in the marketplace, a tentative openness replacing the cold shoulders she had once received. Children who had been warned to stay away started approaching her with curious eyes, emboldened by their parents' shifting attitudes. Chaska felt the effects of their courage too. While many elders still held on to old prejudices, younger members of his community began to question their traditions and reflect on his choices. One afternoon, as Clara and Chaska wandered through the now familiar grove where they first bonded, they discussed the differences they had already begun to see. "Do you think we really made a difference?" Clara asked, her brow furrowed with uncertainty as she plucked a flower from a nearby bush. Chaska smiled, his eyes lighting up with warmth. Change is rarely immediate, but you've planted seeds tonight. It takes time for them to sprout and grow. He paused, looking out into the distance where golden rays cast a warm glow on the horizon. But those seeds are being nurtured by conversations that are happening now, ones that may not have occurred before. Clara took in his words, feeling a sense of comfort in their shared vision for a more accepting future. I just wish it could happen faster, she admitted, her voice laced with frustration. I want everyone to embrace our differences without fear. Chaska nodded knowingly. So do I, but remember that change doesn't come without challenge. We've already faced our fair share of resistance. We must remain steadfast. As they continued walking, they stumbled upon a small gathering of townsfolk discussing recent events. Clara's heart raced as she recognized some familiar faces among them, both supporters and detractors alike. It was clear that discussions of acceptance had continued beyond their storytelling night. However, tensions were still palpable. Look at them. One man scoffed loudly enough for everyone to hear. They think we'll just forget about their scandalous friendship. It's an affront to tradition. An affront. Clara stepped closer with Chaska at her side, feeling emboldened by their connection. It's an opportunity for growth. By embracing one another, we can strengthen our community rather than tear it apart. The murmurs shifted as Clara's voice rang out above the crowd, drawing attention as she faced both allies and adversaries alike. Chaska squeezed her hand gently in support, grounding her amidst a storm of emotions. Another woman stepped forward from the group, a familiar face who had once raised her voice against Clara. You're right, she admitted hesitantly, glancing between Clara and Chaska. But many of us have been taught to fear what we don't understand. Then let's change that narrative, Chaska declared, stepping slightly forward. Fear thrives on ignorance. It's time we educate ourselves about one another instead. Their words hung in the air like a challenge posed before an audience eager for guidance. Some faces softened as they listened closely while others remained clenched in defiance. Perhaps we can hold more events, Clara suggested passionately, feeling a spark ignite within her once again. We could invite people from both communities to share not only stories but also cultural traditions, teach each other about our lives so that understanding can replace fear. A flicker of interest caught in the eyes of several townsfolk as they considered her suggestion. A glimmer of hope began to spread among the crowd. But still lingering were those who resisted change, deeply entrenched by years spent upholding divisions. The man who had initially scoffed stepped forward again, anger bubbling beneath his surface. You think we should just accept this? You're turning our town upside down. No, Chaska countered firmly. We're turning it right side up. The crowd erupted into murmurs, split between those who agreed with Clara and Chaska's vision and those still clinging tightly to old prejudices. In that moment of tension, Clara felt a rush of determination surge within her. This was not just about her or Chaska anymore. It was about transforming lives in Fort Sumner for generations to come. Every path forward will have its challenges, she stated boldly, standing tall amidst doubt and dissent. But if we dare to cultivate understanding instead of resentment, we can build something beautiful together. As she spoke these words, Clara glanced at Chaska. His presence beside her felt like an anchor amidst swirling currents intent on dragging them back down into fear. Together they represented more than just two individuals seeking acceptance. They embodied hope, the courage to challenge boundaries once thought insurmountable, and strive toward a future built on love instead of division. With hearts ignited by possibility and connections woven from threads sewn through shared experiences, they stood ready together, prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead, while determinedly embracing every part that made them unique in this journey toward true acceptance.